listening to Campbell County's very own sports talk show, Holding Court. Now, back to your host, Keith Hatfield, over WLAF.
And we are back. Second segment, hour 2 here on Holding Court. And it is our pleasure at this time to bring in the head coach of the Wayne County Cardinals, who you may better know as Tennessee great Rodney Woods. Coach, how are you today?
Good. How are you?
Doing fantastic. Certainly great to have you on. I always like to start the interviews kind of at the start of the book. First question I have is quite simple. How does someone from 4 Mile, Kentucky, by way of Lone Jack High School, end up at the University of Tennessee?
Oh, gee. Well, the first coach to come see me play was A.W. Davis. And then from there, Stu Aberdeen came quite a few times. And then Coach Mears, as a matter of fact, before all the rule changes, when you could go watch players, Tennessee saw me play 17 games in a row. One of their coaches did. So just sitting in the living room one night, and my dad looked at me and he said, "I know how bad you want to play at Kentucky, and that's where I want you to play." He said, "But you got to go where you're wanted the most, and these guys want you more than anybody." So that's how I ended up going to Knoxville to play. Of course, I was very familiar with Tennessee. We only got 2 TV stations when I was growing up, and that was Channel 6 and Channel 10 out of Knoxville. So I'd watch tennis. I watched all those replays, that came on at 11 o'clock. I had kept up with them, and actually, Knoxville was closer to me than Lexington was. It was only about 70 miles to Knoxville, and then it was about right at 100 to Lexington. So I was very familiar with Tennessee.
So Coach Aberdeen and Coach Mears' reputations as dogged recruiters were well earned.
And when Coach Mears came into my living room and looked at me and told me that he would promise me 2 things. Number 1 was, you'll start every game you're here unless you're hurt. And the second thing was, he said, I know you love to play fast. And, of course, Tennessee had a reputation for playing really slow at that time. And he said, we'll lead the SEC in scoring if you'll come to Tennessee. And I'm pretty sure we led the SEC in scoring all 3 years I played.
And certainly you're a big part of that. You're a big part of that as the trigger man at point guard. And you also had some pretty good teammates in that run.
Yeah, not bad. Of course, Ernie and Bernard were tremendous players, and I think Coach Mears, I don't think he'll ever get the credit he deserves for the type of coach he was and his understanding of the game. I think probably before anyone, even back to, I would say he was a lot like on the offensive end. He understood it like Hubie Brown did. Hubie Brown always said, offense is spacing and spacing is offense, and Coach Mears had an unreal understanding about spacing on the offensive end and just made it so difficult for teams to help out on Ernie and for teams to help double Bernard the way he spaced the court and his understanding of that. So I think he was, when he probably in the middle of his career, everybody went on and on about his 1-3-1 defense, and all this. I think he was probably a mastermind offensively, and people never realized that.
Do you think one reason that Coach Mears hasn't gotten his due over the years is that he's almost judged by the standards of today, when the NCAA tournament is far easier to make than it was when Coach Mears was coaching? Because for the vast majority of his career, the only way you could make the NCAA tournament was to actually win your conference.
Yeah, and I've talked about that with people many times, Keith. I can't remember exactly. I looked it up at one time. I think he didn't finish below third, but maybe one time in his career there. And he would have made the tournament every single year probably except once. And now, all you hear about these coaches, they've been to the tournament 10 times in a row, and all that stuff. And that guy, I think he would have made it either 12 out of 13 or 13 out of 14. I don't remember, but he certainly deserves to be remembered for what he did there.
And looking certainly a lot of memorable games in your career at Tennessee, and looking back, noticed one in the short-lived National Commissioners Invitational Tournament. You played the genesis of the Indiana team that went on to go 63-1 over a 2-year period.
Yeah, we lost to them in overtime in St. Louis that year, and I remember it well for a couple reasons. We were down 3 or 4 there late, and we got a couple of big steals and got the game tied, and end up losing right in the overtime. And that was the year that a really good player, slipped me here for a second, son played for North Carolina, was a great
Scott
player.
May.
Yeah. He got hurt. He got hurt that year, and so he was the only one that wasn't with them when we played them. And of course, he was a big part. But they had all those guys. Quinn Buckner had to try to guard that guy, and also Scott Benson and all that bunch were there at the time. So that was a really good game, and it was played in St. Louis Arena. In fact, that was one of the coldest places I've ever been in. We went the night before we played them and watched a hockey game, the St. Louis Blues, and then the next night we played Indiana in the first round of that tournament and lost in overtime to them. And the other thing that was crazy about it, I remember, was the next morning, instead of flying back to Knoxville, Bud Ford put me on a plane to Orlando, Florida, to catch up with a baseball team that was playing. So I went straight from basketball to a baseball game the next day.
Certainly not something that's going to happen in modern college basketball.
No, that doesn't happen anymore. We used to joke around with Condridge Holloway. We used to joke with Rick Honeycutt a bunch about we made all SEC East in baseball. Condridge, myself, and Rick, and we always told Rick that game was easy. We didn't even have to practice and make all conference.
Quick question about the arrivals of Grunfeld and King. Obviously, Tennessee at that point had established itself as a solid winning program in the SEC. How surprising was it to see 2 freshmen come in back-to-back years and be able to make that sort of impact?
Well, after they were on campus and playing pickup games, it was pretty obvious what was going to happen. I think a few of my teammates, they weren't quite as impressed. I always talk about one case in particular when Bernard came in. We would play pickup games. Of course, the coaches weren't supposed to organize them or anything. And it's not like now where they could have workouts. I mean, we couldn't have any contact with those guys until October 15th. So once school started, we're in there organizing, and I'm kind of being the leader of the team and the captain and putting things together. And we're playing, 3-4 nights a week in the arena, and coaches aren't supposed to be in there watching. I won't say whether they might have sneaked in up top where nobody could see them or not, but we're in there playing, and Bernard, he's just annihilating everyone. And I remember one of the guys on the team, one of the older guys, he made the statement. He said, "Wait till we play somebody." So we played the first game, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Bernard, I can't remember if it's 41, 42 points, fouls out with about 8 or 9 minutes to go. I remember Coach Mears, when he got his 4th foul, I'm standing over there close to the bench there at a dead ball, and Coach says, "I'm just going to let him play it on out," because we're up about 30, I guess. So he fouls out early in the game. So when the game's over, the same guy says, the same player, he says, "Well, we'll find out what he's made out of Saturday when we go to Michigan." So we go to Michigan and play, and they have C.J. Kupek, Joe Johnson, Steve Grody, and that group ranked in the top 5 in the country. We lose in overtime, and I can't remember, but Bernard had like 38 or 39. Same player looked at me in the locker room when we're getting dressed. He goes, "He's for real." I said, "I've been telling you that since the first day he walked in here. He's different." But and the great thing about all those pickup games, I mean, it was like a fight every night because he and Ernie always played on opposite teams of each other. and boy, it was almost a fist fight every time we played, because both those guys were so competitive and hated to lose. They were used to, when I played pickup games in high school, or in between high school and college, we might have, there might be 12, 13 guys around playing. So if you got beat, you had to sit out for one game and then you're back in. Where Ernie and Bernard played, when they lost, it might be 2 hours before they got to play again. So those pickup games to them were a bloodbath. They weren't going to lose, and so we had some interesting pickup games, to say the least.
Bernard, the best player you ever saw in the SEC?
The best I ever saw. I've always said the three best I ever saw were Bernard King, Pete Maravich, and Dan Issel were the three best I ever watched.
And certainly, I think if you start a squad with those three, you've got your point guard, your small forward, and your center. You're well on your way to a pretty good team right there. Coach, you there? Coach, do we have you back?
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe our Wi-Fi went out all of a sudden here.
Okay.
So it's like I'm back in 4 Mile, where we always said we got Monday Night Football on Wednesday.
Certainly.
But,
Certainly.
I was telling about Bernard, and so I was taking xylocaine injections in my ankle joint for a bunch of the games my senior year, just to get to play. And so I was pretty swollen after a game down in Auburn, and Coach Mears and Bernard was having knee problems. Coach Mears called me and I into his office on Tuesday after we got back late Monday night. And he said, you two guys are not going to practice one day this week, but you're going to play Saturday night against Kentucky. And, of course, Kentucky, that was the team that was the national NCAA runner-up in 75. And so I go to practice every day. I'm sitting over there in a chair on the side. I'm holding a basketball, kind of just fiddling with it or whatever, just keeping my hands on the ball. Bernard doesn't show up the whole week for one practice. We don't even see him. So he goes from Wednesday through Friday, and nobody sees him. We go in that game on Saturday night, and he was just unstoppable. He wore Kentucky out, and they could not guard him anyway. And I just said that was so amazing to me that a guy could go the whole week, not touch a basketball, and come in and play like he played. And I think that showed what type of how blessed he was athletically as a basketball player, and also his determination was just unbelievable. But that was one of the amazing things I saw while I was there.
Well, and as great as Bernard was, Kentucky always seemed to bring out the best in him too.
Right, and that was the game. That was the famous game from earlier. We lost to them up in Lexington in early January. I think this game was about the first, second week of February, but back in early January, we lost there like 85-82, and it was just most physical game I was ever in. I mean, guys, I think Austin Clark going for a loose ball one time, Rick Roby just knocked him completely out going for a loose ball. And, of course, the next day in Knoxville on every TV station on the sports news, every time you turn it on, they're showing little clips from the game of, where we were just clobbered on rebounds or whatever, or loose basketballs. And they're playing the music in the background, the song Kung Fu Fighting. And so Coach Mears tells us in a meeting, he says, don't pay any attention to that stuff. Said, I did that. That's a bunch of foolishness. He said, but I promise you this, when they come back here in February, they won't touch us, because every time they breathe on us, it'll be a foul. And so he was right, and we won 103-98 in that game. So.
Jumping forward to your coaching career, and something that actually one of the reasons you're still a legend in this listening area, Coach. If you would talk a little bit about your time at Powell Valley.
Oh, I had a great time. Had so much fun there, and I always said one of the things about high school basketball, everybody talks about, Kentucky, all this and everything, and nobody really cares about it in Tennessee and all that. I'll tell you what, I've never been to a place that loved basketball like those people did at Powell Valley. I don't know how many times, Keith, we played, and they had to lock the doors because nobody else could get in. And that was so much fun there. We just had a great time, had a lot of success, and really good players. And our team in '79, we lost in the state championship to Bolton out of Memphis area, and they hadn't lost. They finished like 36-0. We finished 34-2, and had two tremendous players when I was there. Two guys that Knoxville News Sentinel named the scoring twins, and Barry Kincaid, who was from La Follette, and David Helton that was there, both about 6'5", and just two excellent players, two really good basketball players. So we had a lot of fun. But those people just love basketball. And in fact, last year, of course, it's no longer there. It's part of Cumberland Gap High School now. And last year, my team at Wayne County, we went over to Cumberland Gap and we played Clinton, Tennessee. And we had a 40-year reunion of that '79 team. So it was really a great time to see all those guys. But those people of Powell Valley, they love their basketball.
Are those reunions of teams that have succeeded in seeing what your players have been able to do going forward in life? Is that one of the things that really makes coaching worthwhile?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, see those guys, and I love it when the guys, especially when they want to come back. And we have guys, and I'm not one of these coaches that's just so intense before a game. I don't want to see anybody. Any player that's ever played for us, they can just walk in our locker room before a game or whenever they want. And we have a lot of guys. We'll have one or two players, from different eras that'll show up about every game and come back to the locker room. So that really makes it fun.
What was the ultimate kind of trigger that made you want to get into coaching?
Well, I don't know really. I just always felt like I wanted to do that, and Coach Mears knew that. Billy Justice told me one time that he felt like I probably got closer to Coach Mears than any player ever did. That Coach really kept his distance from people, and that he felt like I had influenced him more than any player that ever played at Tennessee. And I remember, again, going back to that Auburn game, I remember we were working out on a Sunday night, and they would always, when practice was over, they would say, all right, the bus is leaving in 30 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever. And so I'd always try to hang around, shoot some extra shots, free throws and things like that before I went in to shower to get on the bus. And I'm out there shooting by myself. It's just me, and all of a sudden Coach Mears walks over and starts rebounding for me and throwing them back to me. Well, I shot one. It kind of hit off the side of the rim, bounced away out in the corner. He goes and gets it, picks it up, and turns and shoots it. Of course, he was left-handed. And I said, Coach, I've been here 4 years. I've never seen you shoot a basketball. And he looked at me and he said, I did that for a reason. He said, I know how bad you want to be a coach. And he said, I'm going to give you some advice. Don't ever shoot with your players. Don't ever play pickup games with them. Don't ever play one-on-one. He said, because they mistake kindness for weakness. He said, keep your distance. And so I never, in all my 40 years of coaching, I never played pickup games with my players.
And speaking of your players and the success you've had at Wayne County, Coach, for the uninitiated and people who don't follow it, talk about what an atmosphere it is at Rupp Arena for the Kentucky High School Sweet 16.
Oh, it's unbelievable. But it's not what it once was. I remember watching Allen Houston when he played, going against Richie Farmer, who played at Kentucky in the state championship. That would have been about 87, I believe. And it was sold out. There were 23,000 there to watch that game. In 89, my team, we lost in the state championship to Pleasure Ridge Park out of Louisville. We lost 75-73, and there were over 20,000 for that game. Now, it's gotten to where, used to it would be anywhere from 15 to 16,000 for every session. And the tournament starts on Wednesday with 16 teams. There's 4 games Wednesday, 4 games on Thursday, and then winds right on down through the weekend. and the attendance is not near what it was. They're probably now for a championship game now, they'll probably get anywhere from 10 to 12,000. But back in the 80s and early 90s, there were anywhere from 18, 20,000 watching those games. But it's just it's an unbelievable feeling. We've been fortunate enough here to make it. Since I've been here, we've made it 9 times, and before I got here in 1987, they had made it 1 time. So we've had a lot of success and a lot of fun over the years.
With all of that success and all of the accomplishments, being a National High School Athletic Coaches Association Hall of Famer, what motivates you and what keeps you going and keeps you coming to the gym every day, Coach?
I just like going to practice, and I like teaching people how to do it right. I get so frustrated watching games with fundamentals, how bad they are, and I was doing a little bit of an interview last night, and we were talking about some things about high school basketball, and I said, you can play fast, you can play slow, you can play zone, you can play man, you can do a lot of different things and still win. But I think the common denominator with all of it is, and it's not just the one word discipline, it's consistent discipline and doing, my players know that every day I go in there, I'm not going to let them get away with bad fundamentals. I'm not going to come in one day and let it go, and the next day rip them up, one side down the other. I'm going to rip you every time. It's not going to change. So I think, kids, I think it's important for kids to know and understand what the coach is what he's going to allow, and kind of like the old saying, we get what we tolerate. So I won't tolerate you not doing it right. Now, we may not win if we don't win every game, but we're still going to do things the right way. And so I get so frustrated watching games when guys do things like dribble a loose ball when the ball's loose instead of securing it, grabbing it, and then going with it. That just runs all over me, and then they get back tipped from behind because they're playing lazy and just dribbling the ball. Just a lot of little things like that I just have fun. There's a satisfaction of teaching people how to do that the right way and then seeing them do it on the court.
Is the erosion of fundamentals you described there, is part of that kids play too many games now and don't spend enough time in the gym practicing, working on their fundamentals?
I think there's something to that. I still go back and I still blame coaches. I think coaches are lazy. I think they just allow that, and they don't see how important that is. And until they lose the ball, then they're ready to say something about it. And but I know the AAU circuit kids. I guess the biggest thing with that upsets me with the way the AAU circuit goes, I think kids have gotten to where they're kind of immune to losing because they go play a game. It's like I was talking about Ernie and Bernard. When you lose, you don't get back on the court forever. And with AAU, you lose one, the guys all high-five and shake hands with the other team, and then they go grab something to eat, and they play in another hour, and then they play in 2 hours. So they're playing 3 and 4 games in a day like that. And I don't think the winning part becomes as important because you're going to get to play again. And like I tell my guys every time we play, we have a game tonight, and we were talking about this a little bit yesterday. We just get to play once today. And we don't get a chance to, if we lose tonight, we don't get a chance to come back in 2 hours and try to correct it. We get one chance. And that's my biggest problem with AAU is the attitude that guys have about losing. They just kind of blow it off and go on to the next game.
And, Coach, I would be remiss given sitting here in the studios of WLAF, I didn't ask you for at least one story about a true La Follette legend and someone I know you knew well, Mr. Ed Bailoff.
Oh, he was great, yeah. And Mr. Bailoff was tremendous, too. When I was at Powell Valley, he was a big supporter and helped us financially in a bunch of ways with our basketball program there. So he was always a good friend and was really, really good to me. Probably kind of. I remember he and John Ward were following the bus because, Mr. Bailoff wouldn't fly anywhere when we went to games. And so a lot of times John Ward would ride with him because they were really good friends, and I think he didn't want Mr. Bailoff to have to drive by himself. So we're headed to Lexington to play, and we get off in La Follette. The bus gets off in La Follette because it was snowing so bad, and I think they got afraid to drive their cars. So Mr. Bailoff and John Ward got on the bus with us and went from there on to Lexington. But I just remember him driving so many places and long trips to see us play.
Well, one of the stories that Mr. Bailoff always loved to tell on himself was that he would be so nervous during games, he would never actually stand out and watch the game. He would be up in the concourse, walking the concourse as the game was going on.
He sounds like that made me think of Kevin Feltner. I don't know if you've ever met Kevin, but Kevin runs the Tennessee Bobcats AAU team that my son played for, and Mikhail Foreman that played at Tennessee, and John Fulkerson played on. And in fact, I coached that team for a half of the summer one year because their coach had a son playing Little League Baseball, and he wanted to coach him in the All-Stars somewhere there in late June. So I finished out the year and had John and Kevin's wife would always come to the games, and every time we'd get in a tight game, she would go to the bathroom and stay until the game was over. And come back out and didn't even know who won or anything until it was over. But
well, and I just handed a note. Go ahead, Coach.
Speaking of our boy John Fulkerson, I stay in touch with John. Great kid and everything, and so I text him weekly and I remind him he does need a haircut badly. I think most people are going to concur with you on that one, Coach. Of course, he's got a little bet going with one of his teammates from the Bobcats. That plays at I think he plays at UNC Asheville. It's a point guard, and they made a little bet before school started about which guy could go the longest, get their hair the longest, or whatever. So, but they both need a haircut. So,
absolutely, I think we would concur on that. We just WLAF historian Jim Freeman just handed me a note to tell you that WLAF, in fact, broadcast the Powell Valley state title game in 1979.
1979, yeah. Got beat 64-62. Bolton had Cecil Dowell, if you remember him. He played point guard at Ole Miss.
Bolton, who ended Campbell, another area team, Wynn High School made the state tournament and played Bolton with Sylvester Gray, and Bolton also took them out.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
But Coach, it's been an absolute pleasure. I think I speak for the audience when I say thank you for giving us a whole bunch of your time on a game day, and it is greatly appreciated, and it has been an absolute pleasure.
Well, I've had fun, and I'll tell you one quick one as we leave. How much I love to see Coach Mears. Coach Mears' will, he left me his orange Mercedes, which by the time he left it to me, it wouldn't run or anything. But he had an orange Mercedes, and he left it to me, and in his will it said he left it to me because I was the only person he knew that hated Kentucky as much as he did. So...
Well, there you go. He obviously recognized some of himself in you, Coach.
Yeah.
Well, Coach,
it's been fun.
Good luck tonight. I think you've got Middlesboro tonight. Good luck.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. That is volunteer legend Rodney Woods, and folks, I hope you enjoyed that 1/3 as much as I did. That is some of the most fun I've ever had doing an interview right there, and a walk back in history from a true volunteer legend. We're pretty much up against it. We'll be back next week, 1 p.m. Hope to bring a show half as good as what we brought today. We'll talk to you again soon. Have a great weekend, everybody.